Welcome to the Political Matrix News. We have the sources, we have the truth from inside the political matrix.
Okay, folks, and as always, coming out of a break, we're laughing about something, and we'll get into that later. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Political Matrix News, the Sunday edition. Joining me are my longtime partner, Greg Fink, and my old boss at the radio station, Mike Bates, who has his own radio station still and a podcast of his own, the MikeBatesShow.com. Welcome to us, Mike. Mike travels around a lot. Sometimes we might catch him in Pensacola. Sometimes he's in Alaska. He's all over the planet. Welcome, Mike.
Happy to be part of it. Thank you for the invitation.
No problem. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone, like and subscribe us. The way we use a lot of political language that winds up getting downgraded us by the algorithm. So if you could like and subscribe, even if you've done it in the past, it really makes sure that we can continue to bring our backstage perspective. Because keep in mind, Greg and I each have been in politics for 30 years, and Mike, God knows, Mike has been in radio and most specifically talk radio since the early 60s, wasn't it, Mike? Something like that?
Well, not quite that. I've been in radio since 1980.
555.
Fair enough. Anyway, so I don't know about you guys, but it just seems to me like everything is just in a weird place right now. And
Well, isn't
a good thing. But I mean, not just the political scene. I mean, literally everything that I seem to be involved with, from banking all the way up through construction, and there just seems to be weird things going on, and
no progress.
I guess it is, but it just feels like Elon Musk is less of a tech billionaire and more like the representative of the aliens who's preparing the planet for how things are going to be when they get here. I don't know. It just seems weird.
Well, he's ready to occupy Mars, and so I mean, he's advertising that very well. All his wonderful shirts that he's sending out every time he's speaking with President Trump or anybody about anything about moving this country forward. However, his chainsaw, I think I don't think he understands maybe the slur about taking a chainsaw to something where you should take a scalpel to it. I understand. Maybe he doesn't get it that the chainsaw analogy is not a good analogy.
But it's very much a WWE World Wrestling type presentation, and it's all about the showmanship, and I don't like it. I mean, I get why people do. I don't, okay? But I understand why he's doing it. Donald Trump's always been a showman. Elon Musk is sort of a showman come lately, but he's getting into it. And a lot of this is about presentation and rah-rah, and it's not all that much different than WWE.
Because a lot of stuff that they're doing, they're having to undo, which is kind of embarrassing.
Not really, because the thing that I will back him up on with that chainsaw analogy is they've been trying to use a scalpel for 50 years. And every time you get anywhere near it, there's so much sensitivity to trying to do this stuff delicately that any pushback whatsoever has always kind of resulted in an abrupt stop to the entire process. And these guys are just going to go through and get as much done as they can. Well, we'll go back. But what?
I agree with you to a point, but I think they've been using a scalpel without a blade.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. If he got up there with a scalpel, it wouldn't have made the news.
Boring.
I mean, almost nobody saw it live. So those of us who are aware of it saw it because the news reported it. And had he gotten up there with a scalpel, it would not have made the news. If he'd have gotten up there and said something, well, we've tried a scalpel, now we need to try a chainsaw, that wouldn't have made the news. The whole reason it made the news is because he had the stupid chainsaw in his hand and he revved it up. It was a big one, absolutely.
And we'll see a photo of it here.
In terms of showmanship, in terms of making the news, in terms of getting attention, well, if that's the goal here, you can't fault him because he got what he wanted.
I mean, right now we're only less than, 35 days in. We're less than 35 days in already. And to see how much they've done in such a very short period of time, it definitely got everybody's attention. It's kind of like, whenever a lot of presidents come in, you don't really know what happens the first couple of months. So everybody's just like settling in. We know everything is happening. These guys are blowing everything up very much like a show. And I think it's a good thing because, unfortunately, the audience we have in America today, that's the reason why we have so many podcasts out there. That's the reason why social media is such a big driving force of the news and everything. That's the reason why traditional ways of media are dying and the legacy media is dying, is because people are used to the show. And that's actually really how people communicate best that way. And not to take away any weight of it, the real weight of it is that it's making a big difference in a lot of areas. I mean, they've already collected, several billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in savings through all that chainsawing and cutting that they're doing. They're cutting a lot.
Yeah, well, the advantage that Donald Trump has in his second term is that he knows where things are. It's not his first time at the rodeo. So normally you get a president who's in there for the first time. Well, it takes him that 100 days to learn where the bathroom is practically, right? And in the case of Donald Trump, he knows it all because he'd been in there for 4 years. Now, granted, he was out for 4, but he came in day one knowing the process, knowing where things were, getting things to work. That doesn't happen even at the beginning of a second term.
No.
A consecutive second term.
Exactly.
Because then it's just sort of a continuation of just leisurely doing what you were doing and maybe tweaking a little bit. But him coming in full bore right out of the gate, I think is wonderful. Now, I don't support everything the man's done, but I give him absolute credit for doing what he's doing, shaking up the status quo, and mostly, and I'm just going to be completely honest, the thing that I like best about what has happened since Inauguration Day is that the left has gone apoplectic. So while part of me can praise Trump for what he's done, I actually get more pleasure out of the fact that the left has gone absolutely crazy because Donald Trump has done it. Yeah, it's just great. It's good to see the left finally crying because they aren't getting their way. It's refreshing.
And nothing better than with Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. Kash Patel just got made the new FBI director. I thought it was great. He said back in October that he's going to clear house in the Hoover building the very first day. Then he corrected himself. He said he's not doing it the first day. So he waited the second day. So on the second day, he cleared house in the Hoover building. He's sending the majority of the FBI agents over to Huntsville, Alabama. And he's sending 500 agents over to Huntsville. And the remaining of the 1,500 the agents that are going to be in the Hoover building, he's spraying them out throughout the nation to go to different FBI offices and FBI labs that are all low staffed and low numbers. That that's where the drugs are. That's where the human trafficking is happening. That's where the fights are. That's where the gangs are. That's where MS-13 is. And you can't have. He's realized it, and he got it really quick. You can't have everybody in D.C. You just can't have them all there. You got to spread them out throughout the country. It also takes away the whole weaponization process of the FBI. It gets them out of that culture that all the evil politicians are the only thing they're supposed to go after, and they're supposed to protect the gangs and the drugs. Anyway, it's a mess.
Well, back in the 50s and stuff, it was hard to communicate unless you were right in the same building with people. You'd have to bring something up to a level or down to a level. And so we kind of got locked into this methodology that a central place like this is how, like they'd have a central repository for fingerprints. And if everyone was reporting all their fingerprints to one place, then we'd all have access to it. There's no problem. Well, now we have communications technology that makes that not necessary anymore.
Right.
And so we're actually able to distribute our labor across the country like he's going to do and make it orders of magnitude more efficient, because now you've distributed the knowledge base all over the place, and there's not like sequestered into one building in D.C.
He's also taking it back to the streets. He's taking it to the streets where the fight needs to be. The fight doesn't need to be in D.C. with everybody in D.C. I mean, the fentanyl issue and the drug issue that they're really talking about is a serious issue, is in all the different neighborhoods and all the flyover countries and all the flyover cities. It's all throughout, Nebraska, Chicago, Kentucky, Ohio. I mean, and all the different areas that are not the big super centers of the universe, like, L.A. or New York or D.C. or Miami. Well, and so, I mean, they need to be out there.
Geographic diversification should take place across all the federal agencies, not just the FBI. They all should have that.
And hopefully this is going to be a trend that everybody else will start following that. So, I mean, I do like whenever, I guess Elon Musk recently, this weekend, has sent a whole bunch of emails out to federal workers saying, please list what you've done the previous week, or if you haven't responded to this, it might result in termination or your resignation or something like that. And Kash Patel did stop that for his area. He said, right now I'm basically that he's in charge of everything with the FBI, not Elon Musk or not anybody else. That he's redirecting and he's re-handling and redistributing everybody. So, basically lay off of the FBI people as far as that email goes. But because
Elon Musk
right now he just took over, so he's only been on that job for one day. So
Elon Musk, as you said, he asked for 5 bullet points of something that the federal employee accomplished in the last week. Was it week? Okay.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem is that at least half of them couldn't come up with 5 things. And that's not a joke. I'm being serious. No. At least half couldn't come up with 5 things they did.
Well, but they probably were concerned that saying that hiding stuff from the incoming president was not going to be an acceptable answer.
Well, I do have some issues about. I've been hearing some rumors about in the CDC that they've been, and maybe y'all can correct me on this, that the president and Elon was asking for COVID-19 or any reference to COVID-19 to be removed from anything from the NIH or the CDC or anything, any website, any government website. And basically, they're going to stop any kind of COVID-free tests, and they're basically an anti-COVID terminology policy with any federal government agency. I mean, if that's the case, I think it's wrong personally, because COVID still is alive and it's out there. So I mean, people still need to know about it. Just case in point, just like every other sickness is out there. I don't think there should be a political attack on the narrative of that. But have y'all heard about that?
Well, I haven't, but I do want to address you saying there shouldn't be a political attack on the narrative by pointing out that the narrative was political.
Well, the narrative is political, but unfortunately...
I mean, the narrative then was political.
Okay, well...
Right, so you're saying you don't want to see the political attack now, and I won't dispute that. Okay, well, but I didn't want to see the political attack then.
Okay, well, I understand. Okay, I understand. I agree with you. I don't believe in a political narrative. But you should be able to say that COVID is around and COVID exists, and this is how you handle it, or this is where you need to go to get tested for. I mean, it is a sickness, and if you're a medical website, you should be permitted to talk about the ailments of the community, just like you do with everything else.
Greg, I know that you're new to this process and all, but people with conflicting viewpoints will sometimes distort what's actually going on.
I didn't say distorting. Yeah, and I did not support the distortion of it.
I am saying I am saying that the people who are saying what you're saying are building a straw man that they can easily just knock down.
If that were true, then yeah, I agree with you on that. So when the whole thing is I don't understand the context of it, so I haven't really heard the context of it, and so I mean I just didn't know if that was just a new thing. It's just being floated out there. I mean, I got some friends who work in the CDC. They were mentioned that they're worried about it, but I did not know, if you guys had heard anything about that or not. So, no.
And it's the first time I've heard it, but not the first time I've seen the technique, because it is literally the trick the Democrats have.
Well, yeah. I wish we take all the political shit out of the about people living and dying. It's pretty sick that the Democrats keep on politicizing the health and everything of everybody.
Right, but that sells advertising. That sells
advertising. Yeah,
it raises money, so they're not going to stop.
It's also destroying a news network. MSNBC is being dismantled one by one right now. I mean, Joy Reid, thank God she lost her show, and her ratings are in the tank. And I think Rachel Maddow, who gets $40 million a year from that place, I don't think her ads are even generating anywhere near that kind of revenue for her to get that kind of salary.
God, I want her agent is who I want.
$40 million a year, and Chris Hayes only gets $10 million a year.
I don't understand that because I've watched her a number of times over the years, and I have yet to see a time when I've heard content from her that even began to seem like it was worth $40 million a year.
Mika gets $8 to $12 million a year reportedly, and Joe Scarborough gets around $5 or $6 million a year for the Morning Joe program. The rest of the guys are getting between like $4 and $8 million a year, and she gets 40.
Well, I don't understand what Rachel Maddow is doing to get that kind of money, but the best news of the week was Joy Reid's program being canceled. Because she was the absolute worst on MSNBC, which is really saying something when you consider how bad so many of the MSNBC hosts are. For her to be the absolute worst, so I say, Joy, good riddance. I take great joy in your departure.
Well, I think her last week she had a Michael Steele on there, who used to be a good Republican a long time ago.
Yes, Republican a long time ago.
Yeah,
What?
he's a never Trumper. He's a Lincoln never Trumper kind.
Yeah, well, he's a Romney guy. Yeah, he's one of the Romney guys. He's a vice lieutenant governor underneath Romney, actually. In Massachusetts and everything, or he's in Maryland. That's right, he was in Maryland, lieutenant governor, and he's an RNC chairman during Romney. And the party has changed a lot. I mean, basically, for anybody who's new at party politics, the Republican Party of when you and I were really working in the trenches doesn't exist anymore. I mean, Trump has destroyed that party totally. That party doesn't exist. It's now the Trump Party, and it's a bigger tent. It's a more libertarian-driven tent. I don't really know exactly on the social scale how much more religious it is, but it seems to be, somewhat almost the same as it was before, with Franklin Graham being very active, along with the McMahons on the WWE side. And so you have a very big cross-mix there of culture between the religious side and the non-religious side. So it's a very big tent compared to them. But Michael Steele, when he blew up this week on the Joy Reid show, he blew up and started cussing one day after another. And I think they just finally had enough. She's out. She's gone.
Well, thank God. I'm just, I don't want to sit there and spend a whole lot of time just, lambasting Michael Steele. But I mean, the thing is that he is exactly, what was wrong with the Republican Party for the whole time. My only attraction to the Republican Party when he represented the Republican Party was they were way better than the Democrats. And the whole time I was feeling more libertarian, although there are a lot of libertarian views that I just think kind of go a little too far.
Right.
I mean, I think we should have the right to defend ourselves with whatever weapons we can, but I don't think we need nuclear weapons. So, I mean, there is a line. But at the same time, I always keep going back to, and I know Mike knows this, that during the Civil War, or not the Civil War, during the Revolutionary War, a good chunk of the artillery that was used by our side was the private property of the founding fathers, like various wealthy landowners and stuff like that. They were the ones that had the money to go out and buy a cannon. And after the war was over, they gave the cannons back. That's why there were so many plantations with decorative cannons out front, because they didn't know what else to do with the darn things.
That's true.
Yeah. So
private ownership
this is the time
arms.
when this is the time, and this should tell you everything you need to know about the Second Amendment. When it was written, they were private individuals were allowed to own some of the most advanced weapons that they're in existence, and no one even looked at it twice.
Right. Well, I think
I don't want to get all too late on this right now.
Yeah, well, that kind of goes into the whole sanctuary city idea here, that these wonderful Democrats can turn all these sanctuary cities and sanctuary states into their own little kingdom away from the federal government, where they don't think Cash or Tom with the ICE or the Border Patrol guys or any of those guys, any of the federal guys, period, are being safe so whatsoever in their area, until they finally, got Eric Adams on board. And granted, everybody thinks it's a quid pro quo, that he's actually doing his real job of keeping New York safe and keeping them strong and thriving. And but I think the whole idea the DOJ is suing the states now is a good way to put them on the defensive quickly, immediately, and to get this whole sanctuary thing put to rest. Especially, I think we have a Supreme Court now that's going to work with it.
Well, if you let the state, and I guarantee this is what the conversation was, if you let the states file the lawsuit, then they get to frame the argument. If you file the lawsuit, then the entire narrative is how you're framing it.
Right. It's like the New York governor thinks that she can stand up to Pam Bondi, and Pam Bondi said, "Bring it on."
Bring it on.
It's going to be fun.
Well, and that was over the transgendered issue of biological men playing in women's sports.
Right.
And what's so ridiculous about that, besides just the obvious absurdity of it, just from a purely legal perspective, which is how I like to analyze things, the whole reason that the transgendered sports thing became such a big issue during the 4 years of Joe Biden was because he threatened to cut off federal funds to states that didn't do it. So now Donald Trump says he's going to cut off federal funds to states that won't go along with his policy, and all of a sudden they're going to sue. If it's imposed by executive order, it could be retracted by executive order. So what is the argument about?
Well, the mean orange man's not playing ball.
Exactly.
And the states will absolutely lose that one. I mean, if you look at historically what Congress has done, and really what executives have done as well, it's not always been through congressional action, but let's think of some state laws, things that are within the purview of the states. We'll look at the drinking age. It used to be drinking age was 18 in a lot of states, 19 in a lot, 20 in a few, 21 in a lot. And it was during Reagan. Reagan said, if you don't raise your drinking age to 21, we are cutting off your federal highway funds. Well, lo and behold, what happened? All the states said, okay, 21 it is, because they didn't want to lose their federal highway funds. The federal government wanted all the states to have mandatory seatbelt laws, but it wasn't within the purview of the federal government to impose it. So they said, hey, if you don't pass a law mandating seatbelt usage, well, guess what? We're going to cut off your federal highway funds. The next thing you know, lo and behold, all 50 states have mandatory seatbelt laws. So using federal dollars to impose policy upon states is nothing new. Now, I'm not saying it's right. I don't like it. But it's nothing new. There's precedent for it. And when Pam Bondi, or actually Donald Trump in this case, said, bring it on, yeah, we'll see you in court. Yeah. And he'll prevail in court. He will absolutely prevail in court.
Yeah, it looks like, the Pam Bondi lawsuit was a week ago.
He put it in one of the judges that he appointed. He should put in one of the judges that someone else appointed, like a good person.
Well, that is one of the problems you have, is that there are judicial activists in robes who are dedicated more to the ideology of the party that put them on that bench rather than they are dedicated to the Constitution itself. And there was a judge, his name was Stephen Reinhart. Stephen Reinhart was on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and he was one of the most overturned appellate judges in history. And he was doing an interview, and he was asked by the moderator, who was, I forget who it was that was asking the question, but he was asked the question, how does it feel to be overturned so often by the Supreme Court? And he got a little smirk on his face, and he smiled, and he said, well, they didn't catch them all, did they? He was so proud of the fact that he still, even though he knew they were wrong rulings, they knew they were unconstitutional rulings, he was so proud of the fact that, well, some of them are going to get through because the Supreme Court doesn't take but a minuscule percentage, and that's like less than 2% of the cases it's asked to take. So he knew that some of his known illegal decisions would stand simply because they can't catch them all. Now, fortunately, Judge Reinhart is dead, so good for him. But I guarantee he wasn't the only judge out there who has that ideology.
No. And so, I'm looking right now at the update here. It looks like Pam Bondi is suing, I guess, Illinois, Chicago, and New York for sanctuary city issues currently. Right. So that's all under the current stuff right now. And I don't know if y'all heard today about the L.A. Mayor. She fired the fire chief for sending 1,000 people home on the day of the fire, which I have to do with maybe they didn't have enough water for them. I mean, there might have been reasons why she sent those 1,000 firefighters home. They weren't supplied. First of all, they didn't have the equipment or the tools to do what they had with the firefighters that they had on staff. But it is really bad gag on her face to be sending 1,000 people home on the day of the big fire. It's really hard to explain exactly why she did that. Of course, we don't have any idea why she did that because she's not around anymore. And nobody has found her with a microphone or a camera yet to get her side of the story on why she even let go. But I think the L.A. mayor, I guess she doesn't realize that they can't really fire her that easily. They'd have to recall her. So it's a little bit different. But now Gavin Newsom is asking for an additional $40 billion. And the people on the feds are like, what are you doing with the money we got you already?
Well, they need to look into that because where there's smoke, there's fire.
There's fire. There's waste. Ha, ha, ha. And when there's smoke and fire, there's waste. And,
well,
I mean...
Yeah, but at the end of the day, number one, they probably, I'll be honest with you, they probably had something on that fire chief because Otherwise, as soon they have to know as soon as she's fired that they're going to start. She's going to start blabbing, and it may be that they can control her with this, with this 1,000-person narrative. But at the end of the day, she's probably not going to go along with it. To be honest with you,
if that's true that she sent 1,000 people home, and that's unconscionable.
Well, it sounds unconscionable, Greg, but you don't let
it does. You're right. We don't know the context. You're right. We don't know why she fired him. You're correct. And so
because
I'm not, I'm not taking her side or being against her, but it just sounds bad from the very beginning of it.
It does sound bad. It does sound bad, but at the end of the day, you're looking at a mayor who is desperate to find some reason, someone else to focus things on, and that fire. And honestly, the reason that the fire chief probably got fired is because she has already gone on the air a few times and pushed back on the narrative. Her fault, and the mayor makes her to fall on her sword.
Yeah, she's pushing the mayor and the city council's fault for not funding her department. Basically, she had no funding to actually exercise all their jobs properly. So,
and even a blind person could see what's going on there.
Right. But that's what's going on in California. Everybody's blaming everybody else, and they're still voting. By the way, they're still voting in one. I think they're still voting in 1 or 2 counties in California.
Yeah,
no, they're done with that.
Oh,
they're done with that. They've counted
99.999%. It's not 100% yet.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of that. I thought it was done last month.
I'm skeptical of all of it because it went from Donald Trump had a mandate to where Donald Trump just barely won because California voted for 3.5 months.
Yeah, well, and it did turn out that Donald Trump only got a plurality of the vote. He did not get a majority of the vote.
Well, exactly, because they voted for 3.5 months.
Well, okay, whatever the reason is. Initially, he did get a majority, but as California counted, they eventually got to below 50%. And at that point, I figured they're like, okay, we're good. We can stop counting now.
Yeah, the fires burned up. Yeah, the fires burned the houses, but the fires did not burn the ballots.
Yeah,
and so, surprisingly, obviously there's a part of California that didn't give a damn about the fires, so they just kept on voting and recreating new votes, and it's not a mandate anymore.
Yeah,
well, the worst part of California and fires and voting is that the Democrats who are in office now in California, who are responsible for the conditions that allowed that fire to get so out of control, they're going to be reelected. And even if they're not, people of the same ideology and the same stupidity will be elected. They're not going to put intelligent, common sense people into office out in California. It's just unfortunate.
They have an opportunity.
Part of that is the messed up way that the primary happens. It's not a partisan primary. They take the top 2 and they run off against each other. So you typically have a whole bunch of people in a jungle primary, and then the top 2 vote getters are Democrats. So in the general election, you have a Democrat versus a Democrat. And as a rule, generalizations are generally true, but as a rule, Democrats are pretty pathetic people.
Well, I think that a lot of the reason that they love that jungle primary is because the Democrat Party itself can keep control of the Democrats and how many Democrats get into a primary that maybe maybe cause a problem for their own for the party, and the Republicans just throw everyone that they can in there because they're just desperate to get anyone in there.
Well, you look at what happened in CD1 in Florida. Jimmy Petronas, it was a 10-person race, and he got, what was it, 40? No, it was 60-something.
He got 65%.
Yeah, it was 65% of the vote, which I knew he was going to win it based on the Trump endorsement alone. He doesn't live in the district, which is a whole other conversation, but I was shocked that he got 60-something percent. It was like 65, 66%. That took me by surprise too.
Well, the other side of that is it's an abbreviated race, and so normally, and no one spent a ton of money. I mean, they didn't have time to spend a ton of money.
Petronas did. Petronas spent a ton of money.
Well,
he's $1 million in that.
He's spent $200,000.
No, there was over $1 million spent. If you're including PAC money, which you have to, if you're including PAC money, over $1 million was spent in support of Petronas.
For the general
election. I'm not talking about the general. I'm talking about the primary, because in CD1, the general, you don't need to spend any money. The Republicans are going to win. Gay Valamon, she's on the ballot, but she doesn't have a chance, right? once the Republican nominee was selected, well, okay, well, there's the congressman. Just got to wait till April 1st to make it a formality. There's no way on earth a Democrat's going to win the general election in Florida's 1st congressional district. It's 100% going to be a Republican.
What I'm talking about is that normally in a competitive race, there are at least 2 or 3 people that are able to spend several $100,000s on a congressional race, and in this case, there wasn't time to put that much money in the field.
Right. I mean, Joe Rogan spent around like 120.
Petronas did.
Valentino spent like 400,000, but Gene Valentino's money was not very well spent.
Well, Valentino's money was also his own money. He could easily do it because the man's very wealthy. Petronas had a lot of endorsements. He had a lot of PAC money. He had a lot of outdoor money outside money coming in to support him, based largely on the Trump endorsement that he received.
Right.
Most of the candidates, you're right, they didn't have the money to self-fund.
Yeah,
it was a very short race. They didn't have time to go out and get contributions in sufficient amounts to really mount a worthwhile campaign.
And that's my point. And that's my point is that the race is a lot more competitive when there's more than one guy that can spend an adequate amount of money. I mean, when we first estimated that race, we were estimating it was going to take in between $400,000 and $600,000 minimum to even start being competitive. And there were only, as far as I know, only 2 people that even started to spend that kind of money. And even with that kind of money, it's only effective if you can get a consistent message for a really substantial amount of time, so that people can kind of absorb it. Because it's like, for the same reason that you almost never know, for the most of my life, you've never known the name of the next president, the next guy that was probably going to be president, until 3 or 4 months before the election, because then he becomes a lot more clear. But usually the guy that they think would become president, he was never the guy, because he'd fall down in some crazy way. But that's what's going on here. If we'd had time to get people out there and kind of
campaign,
a real conversation going, Jimmy might have still won, but he wouldn't have won by 65 points.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, even Gene Valentino, with how much money that he put in the race, he still ended up with less than 10%. He still ended up with
which just shows the value of a Trump endorsement.
Exactly.
Endorsement, as soon as that Trump endorsement came in for Petronas, I'd say, okay, he's going to win. And unfortunately, nobody else in the race made a big deal that he doesn't even live in the 1st congressional district. Now, he doesn't have to legally. Constitutionally, the representative only needs to live in the state he represents. He does not need to live in the district. And he did say that he was leasing a house in the 1st congressional district. I'd be surprised if he moves into it, but
it is a time-honored tradition.
Yeah. No, I know. And there's nothing illegal about it, but most voters don't even know it, is my point.
Yeah.
I think a lot of voters would hold that against them. But they didn't know, because nobody made an issue out of it loudly enough, often enough, to let people know. There were people on Election Day, and hey, for that matter, there were people after Election Day that I talked to. And I'm talking about people who are typically informed. When I would tell them, Jimmy doesn't even live in the district, right? They're like, what do you mean he doesn't live in the district? He has to live in the district. No, he doesn't. And then I explain why, and then they go look it up, and wow, you're right. He lives in CD2. How's he going to be the congressman for CD1?
A lot of people were telling me that there were ads on Facebook saying that Jimmy Petronas was a part of the Patty family, and he is part of the Patty Seafood, and that he's basically working through his seafood company in Panama City to work with the Patty Seafood to bring more freedom to this area here. I have no idea how they. That was very weird. How people got confused on that. Well, it is very selective Facebook marketing, or spam, as I called it. And right now the governor's race in Florida is the next big political race here in the state, because we got the current guy who's term limited out, and for some reason he's putting his wife's name out there as a possibility to run, which I think, is silly. But, hey, it's really the only way DeSantis can keep his name out there for the presidency race in 2028. So the only way to keep his name relevant for that kind of race, that campaign going on. Because in politics, we all know that once you go out really quick. And the news cycle happens so fast you're going to get left behind very quickly. So to have a DeSantis and as an incumbent governor, proves good. However, the Trump guy, the president, has already endorsed Byron Donalds, who's the congressman out of Naples, Florida. And so, but, it's also very early. Like Scott said before, a lot of things can happen. A lot of things can change. I don't know if Trump will release or undo his endorsement, but you have no idea this far out.
Yeah, it's still very early in that race.
It is. But it's weird that Matt Gaetz was another guy who's talking about running, and he's not going to run at all now without Trump's endorsement. He won't even think about it, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I
think he was already out of that race when the House Ethics Committee voted to release the report. I think as long as that report was suppressed, he had a chance. But once that became public, and I realize he denies everything in it, once it became public, that's too much ammunition against him. He's not going to run.
Thank God. Now if we can just get rid of his daddy.
Yeah,
his dad had that issue where he's taken to the hospital during a speech in Santa Rosa County a few weeks ago. Did you see that?
I did.
Yeah, I mean, apparently it's going to be all right, but it's a scare. I mean,
it is a scare. And look, I don't want.
We're not.
I want people gone, but I don't want them dead. Okay.
No.
So Don, I wish the entire Gates family was completely out of Florida politics, but that's my personal preference, and it's because of the behind the scenes stuff that I know about them and the stuff that people have been talking about that I can tell you is true.
Exactly.
But that's but you want to. I mean, people want to support their guy. They want to support their guy. But the bottom line is that he and his son are two peas in a pod. The only difference between him and his son is he's a lot smoother than his son.
Right. He got away with a lot more. And the only reason his son even exists is because of his father, helping him get away with everything. And Don's been just.
All right, so not to be
as the son is, but
not to be pedantic about what you just, not to be pedantic about what you said, Greg, but doesn't everybody exist because of our fathers?
Oh, okay, yes,
yeah. Legally, you're
okay.
All right, legal political stature.
Yeah, all right. We exist as people, but we don't exist as careers.
Yes, thanks for the clarification, though. I was confused.
And honestly, my expectation is, my belief is that Don will probably make it through, assuming that his health holds up. He'll probably make it through session then knowing, my expectation is that he'll try to figure out some way to feather his nest a little further or consolidate his power base, and then he'll retire early for health reasons.
And we'll have Joe Rogan run again.
Yeah, I believe so.
And that's
an interesting take, Scott.
And that's where we'll see a wonderful state rep. What's his name? The guy that y'all don't like. Who's the state rep?
Alex Andrade.
Alex, yes, AA. He's like an AA meeting. And so Alex Andrade.
Yeah, well, Alex did not seek the Senate seat that was open because he and his wife Jessica have a newborn. Well, not a newborn anymore. I suppose it's a toddler now, but they want to stay home with their daughter. Or he wanted to stay home with his daughter. His wife obviously stays home anyway. Although she's an attorney, I don't mean to say she doesn't work. She works, but I mean she's
yeah. Well,
he didn't want to lose.
He was going to go work. He was going to go work for Matt too, and that never happened. The reason he didn't run for state senate is because he is internal to the Gates organization, and Don was going to run, and he wouldn't dare do something that Don didn't want to do. And we got a guy running right now for Joel's seat, and you look at his fundraising flyer, and half the people on that are Gates acolytes. So I'm like, no, let me go find his opponent now, so I can go work for him, because I am not going to have another Gates acolyte showing up there, because I know who they are and how they operate, and they need to be gone. It has nothing to do with moralism. I don't care if he's slept with every teenager in Okaloosa County. While I mean he should go to jail for it if he has, that's not the thing that's driving my decision. No. It's the fact that they are bad people that do bad things.
And this candidate asked us a long time ago, because we actually worked on his very first campaign that got him elected. and he's still using our logos and our branding and everything that we did. So you're welcome. But he asks us, how do you stay involved in politics and succeed in a very long-term manner? I say, you do not hang out with certain people. You do not surround yourself by a certain political class that basically will lock you in to doing only what they want while avoiding all the needs of the people and the citizens. And what does he do? He gives it's like a gravitational force to this whole Gates crowd. I mean, it's like gravity. The whole power, the whole idea of all the money they're going to make and the power they're going to get, it overcomes their ability to help the people. And it's sad and pathetic, but it seems to be the case here.
What I was told the Gates protocol is exactly what the mafia does. They find some compromising information on you. Sometimes they have you commit some sort of seemingly innocuous violation of the law that they manufacture into a huge thing, and then they give you something, and so they got a carrot and a stick.
Exactly.
This has been told to me a number of times by people that they've attempted to do it to, and some of them that I know for a fact they succeeded in it, and it
doesn't. Like it's another case.
Yeah, I mean, go talk to Joel Greenberg or Halsey Bashir about how that Gates protection racket works.
Not too good.
But I mean, they are they're just people that Florida would be better off without. That's all I can tell you. And I'm glad to see glad to see him go. I mean, it's winding up and it's winding up. I know that Don, what's going to drive Don's exit is going to be his confidence that he can install someone in that Senate seat that will now owe him.
Right, and basically do everything that they want to have done.
Challenge he's going to have is that DeSantis ain't really on the Gates bandwagon anymore. So no. I don't know. He might have to wait for 2 years to do it. I don't know.
I'd be very surprised if he steps down. I mean, I'd even be surprised if he doesn't seek re-election, but I'd be very surprised if he steps down during his.
Remember, I'm talking about something that's health-driven. It's not because he's bored or something like that. It's will he physically be able to complete the term?
All right. Well, obviously, if his health genuinely is a problem, that's one thing. But I don't see there being a plan of him now going, oh, let me get elected and then I'll step down and put somebody in my place. I don't see that occurring at all.
Really, because he told Joel Redmond's campaign staff that he was doing exactly that once his son got to go.
All right, well, I'm not privy to that. If that happened, well, okay, but I can't speak to it because I hadn't heard it.
It's a mess. But, and I don't know much about Byron Donalds. I know he's a good congressman. I think he'll probably be a better governor than anybody from the DeSantis clan. Because I think he comes from the legislature. And Ron DeSantis did too, but I think Ron DeSantis was a very short-term guy in Congress. He didn't really do a lot of listening to how the Congress works and how the legislature works. Or Byron, I think he's more of a player, of a teamwork kind of guy, instead of more of a dictator kind of a guy.
Well, it's no secret that I am a huge fan of Ron DeSantis. I want to see Ron DeSantis in the White House. I mean, I love Ron DeSantis. He's not flawless, but you know what? Nobody's flawless. Well, except my wife, okay? But other than that, nobody's flawless. I think his fight with Disney was unnecessary. There are a few things he did that I sort of rolled my eyes thinking it was kind of unnecessary.
But
Ron DeSantis has been a fantastic governor of Florida. And thank God we had him. And don't forget that we only have him because he prevailed by 0.39% over the mayor of Tallahassee. What was his name again?
The crack addict?
Yeah, but that was the old voter rolls. Gillum,
Andrew Gillum, right, thank you.
Yeah, I gave
him
a guy.
16 months later, Gillum was found in a hotel room with a naked male prostitute doing crystal meth. So the voters of Florida escaped very narrowly escaped that bullet. I love Ron DeSantis. He barely got in, but then he got reelected by 19 points, too. So obviously I'm not the only voter who loves him.
Yeah, actually, let's go back to the point spread difference. One thing Scott and I are actually working on, there's a lot of voter fraud that we're finding here in Florida. And the votes were always close we always talk about Rick Scott always winning by a point or less, or Ron DeSantis winning by a very close election, and Bill McCollum winning by a very close election, and so on and so forth. That was all during a lot of the voter fraud. There are a lot of dead people and felons who were on those rolls that got purged off in 2022. And once he got purged off, the elections haven't been anywhere close at all. It's very, very red. This is not a purple state or anywhere near that at all. And so, I mean, that being said, I think no matter who the Republican is, it's going to blow them out, period. I think Byron or Casey, was it Casey DeSantis?
Yes.
And so I think whoever the Republican nominee is going to be is going to win by 10 points. I mean, Florida is definitely a red state now after that voter purge happened. In fact, they took 570,000 people off the rolls. And it is a lot of corruption, a lot of dead people, kind of like what Doge is fighting right now with the Social Security. A lot of people who are not alive anymore are still getting SSI checks and so on and so forth. And so they're fighting a lot of that here in Florida as well. And it's kind of ironic.
Yeah, but hold on just a sec, Greg. Hold on just a sec, Greg, because there's been a lot of misinformation about that Social Security fine.
Okay.
It is true that they had more people listed as eligible than there are Americans even living, okay?
Right.
And it is true that they found millions of people over the age of 100. I mean, I forget what the number was, 13, 14 million. There's 90,000 Americans that are over 100 years old. So they were on the rolls, but they weren't getting checks. They were just on the rolls.
Right.
And even that wasn't new. We knew that in 2021 when the Inspector General did an audit and said at the time, hey, we got all these Social Security names listed of people that are well over 100. We know they're dead. Why are they still on the rolls? And you know what the answer was they got back? Oh, it would cost $30 million to clean up that list. I'm like, $30 million? You do a batch file change and you're done. How that possibly cost $30 million? So I'm glad that they found it. I'm glad they're going to correct it. But I also don't want to allow people to have the misimpression, and a lot of people have it, that those millions of 180-year-old people were receiving monthly government checks through Social Security, because they weren't.
Well, now I will say this. We don't know if any of them were. We believe that none are few, but we don't know.
Look, I haven't audited the file myself, but the Social Security Administration, if we are to believe them, has come out and said, yeah, they're on the list. We've known that since 21, but they've not been receiving the checks. And I don't think they would lie about that.
I don't think they would know.
Yeah, I mean, until there's a real
audit done. It's easy enough to cross-check the Social Security number against the check being issued. How hard's that?
How hard is it to get 200-year-old people off the list?
$30 million, apparently.
But you see what I'm saying? And the thing is they say it would cost $30 million. All it would really take is, the entire army of the Social Security Administration, as they're processing things, to say, hey, a little extra training, why don't you guys look out and flag some of these suspicious things, and then when they come through, we'll fix them. There's no system like that at all in the social. That's why we wind up with all these extra things, because they're not even making an effort to do it.
There's no question there is waste, fraud, and abuse of Social Security, and I'm glad that Elon Musk and Doge is doing what they're doing.
All right.
I just corrected the false impression that millions of 180-year-old people were receiving checks, because they weren't. That's
I don't believe that millions are, but I believe that it is a route for correction so that you can pay off certain people that are doing other things.
Well, my whole analogy here is that it goes pretty much parallel with the corruption of the voter IDs here in Florida, where we have a lot of people who are dead or who are felons who shouldn't be voting, who are still voting in the state of Florida. And they should not be voting at all. Well, you had Amendment 4 a few years ago. Felons are allowed to vote in Florida now. Yeah, but I mean, without doing all the paperwork. Without doing you have to do a certain amount of paperwork and everything to do it. To be.
It's pretty
approved.
Basic filing. Yeah, it's pretty basic filing.
You have to make
don't do it. It's not automatic. You still have to do it after you get out of prison and everything. You still got to do the paperwork.
People that are automatically being put on the voter rolls are not being put on because there's a compelling desire to do the right thing.
Of course, it's fraud.
Exactly. If they're putting them on there, it's because maybe they're not going to go vote, but maybe someone else is going to go vote in their name.
Without question.
And for the absence and for the voter ID thefts and everything else, and the fraudsters out there. I mean, you have a lot of people who are voting absentee consistently who haven't been around even in their right mind for 10 or 15 years. I mean, we have that here. We have the same issue here in Lateral County in Central Florida. We're finding it a lot. And I mean, it's just, going in correlation with whenever you have these huge databases, you have a lot of government workers who just don't do their job. And they always throw a big number to fix it for you. Hey, it's going to cost $30 million to fix this. It costs $100 million. It costs whatever. And it's a number that they throw out there to try to get you off the idea of getting it fixed and to try to reroute you to a different solution. The solution is to get it fixed and get it cleaned up. Like you said, it should be a very simple batch process. Cross-referencing the data and everything. It should not cost the enormous amount of money that they're trying to say to fix it at all. In fact, it can be done state by state. You can do it state by state, actually. They want to return everything else back to the states. Do that. But they don't. And the way the elections are going right now, unless we clean up the elections here a lot more in Florida, I mean, I really don't think we've had a really good, solid, clean election in a lot of the counties in Florida for the last several years, especially whenever you see the difference in the votes between before the purge and after the purge. I mean, there's a huge difference.
Well, integrity of our elections, in my view, is paramount. Nothing else outranks that, because if we can't have a clean election, getting the officials elected who actually did receive the majority of the legitimate vote, then we don't have a representative republic. So it is the most important thing that we can possibly do is build in safeguards to ensure the integrity of our elections so that only those people who are legally allowed to vote.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, we had an issue here where they're actually going to the jails and we're registering voters in the jail, in the prisons here.
Well, jails or prisons, because if they're in prison, they're obviously an active felon, they can't vote. But if they are in a jail, it's possible that they're awaiting trial or they've only been convicted of misdemeanors, in which case you don't lose the right to vote. So
you're talking about first offenders. Now, a lot of people do go to jail again. I mean, a lot of people
I understand
go to jail, they're ex-felons. You get arrested
you can
again.
be convicted. Greg, you can be convicted of 1,000 misdemeanors and you still retain your right to vote.
You're right. I understand that. But you can also,
if they're
registering get a felony, get released out of prison, I might break the law again, and get rearrested, although you're an ex-felon. You can also do that as well.
I'm simply, again, saying that if you're upset that they're registering people to vote who are in jail, there's nothing wrong with that, because there's people in jail who are allowed to vote. If you're upset that they're registering people in prison, well, I'm with you. Because you're not in prison unless you're a convicted felon.
But you're also assuming that everybody in jail is a first offender.
I didn't say everybody. I did not. I never said that.
Well, I mean, when I'm saying they're going into jails to register people to vote, they're registering people to vote that might or might not have been repeat convicts or repeat offenders, and they might have had felons in their previous time. They came back and they got arrested for a DUI or something. I mean, you have no idea. I mean, that's the whole thing. Without knowing the context, there's no way to research it.
There's no scenario where higher scrutiny to people who are incarcerated having the ability to vote, whether on an individual basis they have the ability to vote, is not a good thing. You have to have higher scrutiny because there are a disproportionate number of people who are incarcerated.
Exactly.
It's kind of in the middle of what you and Greg are saying. You're correct that just simply being in jail is not a reason in and of itself to keep you from voting, but the number of people in jail that are actually on their way back to prison, because like they're being held in the jail while they're waiting for trial and stuff like that.
Exactly.
It's enormous. I mean, one of the main functions of jail is to take people
who are
in prison and have them closely proximate to the court.
Exactly. And it's happening in quite a few of the counties around here, and it needs to be stopped.
Yeah, and there's a lot of truth in what you're saying, but the bottom line is that Greg's just using some shorthand because he and I are very familiar with the subject.
Yeah. It's a 4-hour conversation,
right? And you are correctly pointing out your points, but he's leaving out a lot of important details for why we're pursuing what we're pursuing.
Well, and understand, I was vehemently against Amendment 4 that the voters very foolishly restored automatically the right of felons to vote in the state of Florida. That was a horrible amendment, never been proposed, was proposed for one reason only, and that is to increase the number of Democrat votes that would be cast, whether they were lawfully cast or not. Allowing felons to vote increases the count of votes that Democrats get. And so I was absolutely against that at the time, and the voters didn't listen to me. It passed overwhelmingly. What can I say?
Yeah, well, what I do know is that
yeah.
Right.
And hey, do you see the Democrats now trying to lower the constitutional threshold now to amend the Constitution in Florida back down to 50%? You see that?
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, so the it's all about the abortion issue. It's all about abortion.
Oh, about the constitutional amendments?
Democrats, yeah, because the number one thing for a Democrat is preserving the legal right to kill an unborn child. And so because the Amendment 4, I think that was also, that Amendment 4 also, that was the abortion issue in 2024. That was also Amendment 4. For those that aren't familiar with Florida's amendment process, you get a new number every election year. So
they recycle the numbers every season.
Yeah, they recycle the numbers, right. So Amendment 4, a handful of years ago, was the one that allowed felons to vote again in Florida. And then in 2024, Amendment 4, different amendment, was the one that would have codified into the Constitution the right to an abortion, along with many other things. So it was a good thing it didn't pass. But it got 58%.
Yeah, 58%.
Of the vote. It was real close.
Around 58%.
But it was definitely over 50%. And so the Democrats are now trying to lower the threshold to modify the Constitution 50% plus one instead of the current 60% requirement, based solely on they want to be able to kill babies as legally and as often as possible.
These are Democrats where, in Tallahassee?
Yeah, this is a state level. This is a state
Democrats
act.
are still trying to propose laws. I mean, how do you know why?
But this would be a law, of course. This would be a constitutional amendment.
Okay, I understand. How do you know why they even bother going to work and writing anything on a binder? Because it's such a super majority in Florida. I mean, they're already overriding the governor's vetoes. I mean, you think they give a damn about what any Democrat is writing on a binder to put it in any kind of committee whatsoever? No.
Yeah, well, the Democrats do get up in the back of the chamber and they try and complain. I mean, I love sitting in the gallery and watching it happen. And I like watching the entire process. I'm not saying I only like watching the Democrats in the back cry and complain. I like the Republicans up front do the same thing or speak in favor. I just like the process. But it is true that about all the Democrats accomplished in Tallahassee in recent years is to stand up in the back of the room and cry and complain during debate, because they don't have much of a voice on anything else.
No, and they used to be able to get some stuff done. You know, back when my cousin Greg was in the legislature, he used to team up with the Democrats all the time for issues that just lacked a handful of votes, and he couldn't, offer them to get a bill passed, but he could offer some backroom support for some other thing that they're trying to get done. And some items. So I mean, there are ways to broker deals with these guys that get you a handful of extra votes when your Republican colleagues are supporting you. But I mean, it happens. It happens.
Yeah, but not now. Not right now. I mean, I don't see any Democrats getting anything pushed any kind of direction whatsoever. With the way the vitriol is on top of the numbers in the system right now, it's
well, whose fault is that?
It's up in Tallahassee.
Whose fault is that?
Well, it's nationwide. Nationwide. The bitter divisions between the two political parties, I don't think has been this bad.
It's very bad.
Probably ever. Maybe you want to say since the Civil War, when the Republicans tried to abolish slavery and the Democrats wanted to keep slavery. Maybe you could argue that the Civil War was more divisive along partisan lines.
I mean,
but
you got
modern day
chanting,
never been more divided than we are now.
Oh yeah, Democrats in D.C. chanting about songs about death and sickness and incumbents, and say they're trying to hurt them and kill them, and they're victims, and the victimology is at such a high level of the Democrat Party. It's sad.
You would think that 4 years ago they would have learned their lesson, because even though they did manage to steal a presidency, what the highlight of my entire 2020 season was when Politico afterwards wrote the article with the title there was a quote from one of the people they interviewed that says, "I am not an effing socialist. Florida Democrats are having a post-election meltdown," and it was because the Democrats have so tainted their brand 4 years ago. You'd have thought that they learned something. This really tells me that there's a possibility that they still haven't learned anything after they lost the presidency and a huge chunk of elected offices nationwide.
Well, the extreme wing of the Democrat Party are a bunch of effing socialists. And the problem is that even the center of the Democrat Party is beholden to them. They can't turn their backs on the extreme left. And so the extreme left directs the party.
But I do think a lot of it has to go back to what we said at the very beginning of the show. It all goes back to showmanship. I mean, this is the way they're doing their show. I mean, they did it on Saturday Night Live. They had a few jabs. They do it on these award shows. They do it in protests. And that's their way of doing a show. And the Republicans have the WWE. They got Fox News. They got Fox and Fox Nation, which you have a lot of big actors now coming over to the right, joining Fox Nation and Fox and everything else. And so you have, basically you're in a war here between two guys who are running the show, and they're trying to see who's going to outgame the other one. And the Democrats suck. I mean, their showmanship is horrible.
Well, they're too deep in their own bubble, I guess, more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I hate.
And that's the problem. You would think as many of these guys as there are in advertising, they'd realize that these angry vibes turn people off.
Republicans are being happy.
And when you can do that enough, it has a certain level of effectiveness in the immediacy. But after people get burned by it enough of buying into something and then finding out that it was not remotely what was sold to them, it just, decreases their sensitivity to it. That's why, when was the last time you heard about someone getting canceled, like actually saying something stupid, and then the media and various groups having effectively getting to them and basically turning their life upside down. Back in the
now.
Huh?
Joy Reid's the most recent one.
Yeah, and I don't remember the name because I'm not into pop culture, but there was some transgender movie about like a Mexican cartel dealer or something, and the actress that was up for some Oscar, apparently they went back years ago on Twitter, and I forget what she said or he said, I'm not even sure what the person is, but that person got canceled. That was pretty recent, but it wasn't happening nearly as much as it was happening during the 4 years of the Biden administration. Exactly. If that's your point, you're absolutely right.
During the Trump administration was when it was at its highest. Toward the end of the Trump administration, it was happening. I mean, you couldn't say anything. I was scared to say anything in the bathroom, in my personal at-home bathroom, for fear someone was going to get wind of some conservative opinion I might have.
Well, and that may be true for nationally.
Other shows got canceled. Dave Chappelle, they tried to cancel him.
Yeah, and that timing is accurate, as you described, during Trump for the celebrities, the well-known names. But it was after January 6th that everyday Republicans were getting canceled.
Right.
Banks were closing people's accounts just because they were in D.C. on that day. People were being fired from their jobs for being president. There was one woman, she was a nurse at a UMass hospital in Massachusetts. She lost her job because she was, and this is a quote, involved in a crime around January 6th. Well, do you know what her involvement in crime was? She was mugged on January 5th in Washington, D.C. She was the freaking victim. And she lost her job because she was involved in a crime around January 6th. So after January 6th, people were being canceled or fired in mass numbers. They just weren't necessarily names people know.
Yeah, but the difference is that it was entirely driven by the media before, and now and after January 6th, it was driven by the government, which is worse.
Like right now,
much worse. Yes.
I do see a possible possible cleansing on the right side, and it looks like they're talking about The View also being canceled. But I think a lot of these issues, though, they're talking about canceling, is because the ratings are so bad. It has nothing to do with any kind of political structure pushing them out because they're being against the First Amendment, like the lady from CBS who was basically saying that the First Amendment incited or freedom of speech incited the Holocaust. I mean,
weaponized.
You're talking about Cheryl Atkinson?
Yeah, weaponized freedom of speech. I know somebody on CBS last week on Face the Nation.
More recent than Cheryl.
Face the
Okay.
Nation, yeah.
All right, because Cheryl had the same issue. I mean, she was censored all the time by the management of CBS. She's one of the true decent journalists.
So the fact that The View and those guys are leaving because of ratings, I think it's the whole free marketplace of ideas and the culture speaking itself. I mean, that's the way it works. If you don't have ratings, you don't stay on the air. I mean, you got to pay for that airtime, baby. That's it.
I am, however, excited to see how, although I doubt I'll watch it only because it happens during a time slot when I'm at work and doing like work things. But I do look forward to the content they'll be spewing out of the Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly show that's being under development right now for Fox News for the same time slot.
So
I got to tell you, I used to love Candace. I mean, I used to just have an absolute crush on her. And I mean politically, I had a crush on her. I loved Candace Owens.
What happened?
But, well, she's got this anti-Semitic streak about her where she's just factually wrong about what's the history of the Middle East. And I'm like, Candace, you're so smart. You're so brilliant. Well, how can you be so wrong on this issue? So I'm not saying I hate her. I'm saying, Candace, what happened? You were so wonderful for so long. And then on this one issue, she's just completely gone off the rails.
I agree.
Well, look,
she's very wrong on that issue whatsoever.
I don't want to shock anyone. Now, first of all, Candace Owens started out as a Democrat activist, so you can't really, really be surprised that she holds some views that we may or may not agree with. But the bottom line is, everything and every word that came out of Ronald Reagan's mouth were things that I just worshipped and agreed with. He occasionally did things I was like, I don't know. But the fact of but he also is the source of a quote that I've always kind of lived my life by, which is that my 80% friend is not my 20% enemy.
Absolutely true. Yes.
So we're going to come together. Hopefully now we start coming together. We start saying what we believe, and then we try to figure out, what we can salvage out of what all of us are saying, and make use of it in a real productive way, instead of figuring out how we can, target someone and take them down because they said something that was an inch over a certain line. This just imaginarily drawn in.
Now, real quick here, before we have to recap up here, we talked about Doge. Now, have y'all heard about the Doge stimulus checks coming out? Around $4,000 to $5,000 per person.
Great example, just like the Reagan thing I was just talking about.
It would be one of the dumbest things they could do. No, it's one of the dumbest things they could do. It's
dumb. No such thing as free money.
Exactly. The problem is, if we really do save all that much money, okay, which I'm a little skeptical we're going to, but let's just say we do. If we really do save all that much money, instead of handing it back to the taxpayers as a stimulus check, how about you pay down the damn debt, which is the real problem here?
Well, their idea is that they're going to do 80% of it toward the debt and 20% of it back to the people because the people need it, which is, it might cause inflation again because it's once again,
that's part of it. Absolutely, that's part of it.
Back out there in the system has no backing, which is the entire idea of how inflation works. But hey, what do I know?
No, the smart way to do it is to take a tax cut, is more of a tax. Just keep cutting taxes, because that's how you give people money back, is by not taking it in the first place.
Right. I'd still rather pay down the debt, because our debt is massive, and it is growing at a massive level. If we go $33 trillion, that means that every 1% that interest rates go up, it costs an additional $330 billion a year to finance it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you realize that we're soon going to be spending more on interest, never mind paying down principal. We're going to pay more in debt service, just interest on our debt, than we are paying to the Department of Defense on an annual basis. That's frightening.
Well, it's also frightening is that the Republicans are once again running to a knee-jerk reaction here to shut the media up and shut the people up because they think everybody's angry with them about all the cuts. And I understand Elon and those guys are getting a lot of pressure. They say they're not worried about it. It's not bothering them, but obviously it is. They feel like they need to give people money back to make everybody happy. You know, the whole idea of Doge is to cut the deficit, cut the budget, and fix it. Not to be
let me correct something about Doge real quick. And I know this hasn't been brought up on this program today, but it's been brought up in a lot of news programs, including Joy Reid. Fortunately, she's not going to be spewing her lies much longer. Donald Trump did not create Doge. Doge was simply a renaming of the the United States Digital Services. Donald Trump didn't even change the acronym. It was USDS, and now it's the United States Doge Services. So he didn't even change the acronym. Barack Obama created that in 2014. How? Via executive action. So all these people who are running around saying, oh, Donald Trump doesn't have the authority to create a department. He didn't create the department. He renamed a department that Barack Obama had created, and you absolutely can. The EPA was created by Nixon executive action. The Peace Corps by Kennedy executive action. And you can go right down the list. In fact, my show this morning, actually today's Sunday, it was yesterday morning, was all about, I went through a list of about a half dozen agencies that were created via executive action of a president. The list, one thing that needs to be corrected is this lie that Donald Trump can't do what he's doing, because he absolutely can. And two, well, nobody elected Donald Trump. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Nobody elected Elon Musk. That's the complaint. Nobody elected Elon Musk. The only executive who gets elected is the president.
Right.
There's one man, the Constitution, there's one man who is the constitutional executive branch. Even the vice president is not part of the executive branch. The vice president is part of the legislative branch constitutionally. And so there's one person in the executive branch under the Constitution, and that's the president. Everybody else works under him.
Right.
And he absolutely has the authority to do what he's doing, subject to constitutional and statutory limitations. And when J.D. Vance tweeted out that the courts cannot restrict the president's legitimate power, he was absolutely right. Mm-hmm. But where people were absolutely wrong was the fake news saying, oh no, J.D. Vance is saying that Donald Trump is a king, that he can do anything he wants. Well, that's not what J.D. Vance said at all. He said the courts can't restrict the president's legitimate power, and it can't. Now, it can restrict the illegitimate power, and if there's illegitimate power exercised, it needs to be stopped by the courts, absolutely. But it's another example of fake news taking something that was in freaking writing. I mean, there's no dispute that he said it.
Right.
He specifically said legitimate power, but the fake news, when they report it, they simply say, oh, he said that the courts can't control what the president does. That is not what he said. Words have meaning.
Yeah, but how do we know we can trust Elon? It's not like he's got any kind of security clearance or anything.
Yeah, right. Well, here's the other thing about Elon. Elon's not, that was a joke, because obviously he has security clearances for his rockets.
Very high.
He builds rockets for NASA that could be used to deliver nuclear payloads anywhere in the world. I'm pretty sure he's headed.
His security clearance might be higher than the president.
Other thing is that Elon Musk doesn't have the authority to cut anything.
No,
and he's not cutting anything. He only has the authority to make recommendations, and then the president can decide what to do with them. He can impose the cuts, or he can say, no, we're not going to do that. So everything that the left is crying and complaining about Elon Musk, it's all built on lies.
It is.
And that is the thing that bothers me the most. I'm perfectly okay if people want to disagree with me. But as Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, and look, I'm not one who goes around quoting Democrats very often, but he was senator from New York. He said, every man is entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts.
Exactly.
And I'm all about correcting the facts. You want to have a subjective opinion that is different than mine? Knock yourself out. This is America. Welcome. But if you're going to have different facts, well, I'm going to correct them.
Right. And when you talk about that issue, I mean, they were really confusing everything in Ukraine and Russia. They're trying to once again make Russia the bad partner of Trump and Ukraine is the total enemy here. And I mean, once again, the facts and the news are all out of whack about how much, we're trying to talk to Ukraine by the mineral rights to pay for all the stuff that we've given them that they probably sold to other people or don't have, or anyway, that they're using for their freedom. Basically, Trump is willing to talk to Putin because Putin's the only other one who's acting like an adult here. And Zelensky's crying about not going to a meeting or being upset about being left out of this or being left out of that. I mean, the whole idea here is that Trump is the guy who makes the deals, not Zelensky.
Yeah, I hear
but at the same time,
like it involves Ukraine. How can you not involve Ukraine? We're going to negotiate peace and impose it on Ukraine. Zelensky should have been involved. If not him, at least a delegation from Ukraine should have been involved.
And should be
Donald Trump and I part company on that.
Okay,
big time.
They should be involved at a certain level. Right now, Zelensky hasn't allowed any elections going on since this whole thing started. I mean, he's, there's a lot of question about the authenticity of the government of Ukraine, in my opinion.
Regardless of that, we have met numerous times. We have had meetings at every level of government with Zelensky, and we have yet to meet with Putin. And if you're going to solve it, I got to talk to everybody.
Obviously, you got to talk to Putin. I'm not complaining that he's not talking to Putin. I'm complaining that he's leaving Ukraine out of it. And Donald Trump is going to impose.
How's he leaving him out?
No, well, if you let me finish, Donald Trump is going to impose some kind of a peace deal on Ukraine that is going to end up rewarding Russia for its aggression. And that is a very bad precedent to set.
I think
absolutely they're going to be rewarded.
Stop the fighting and stop the shooting and stop the killing.
No, but they're going to be rewarded because Russia's not going to have to give back the territory in Ukraine that they've taken. So Donald Trump is trying to impose this peace deal where Ukraine will have to give up the 20% of its territory that is presently occupied by Russian forces. We cannot allow that kind of aggression to just go unchallenged.
Are you talking about Crimea?
You get to keep it?
Are you talking about Crimea or the recent?
Well, Crimea is part of it, but the Donbass region, all of it. The entirety of where the Russians are now, Donald Trump is willing to let them stay, redraw the border. And I'm saying we can't reward Russian aggression. I'm not saying that the American military needs to go over there and stop them. Okay, I'm not advocating that at all, so don't think I am. But to end the war on terms that allow Russia to win territory acquired through force is a terrible precedent to set in 2025.
I agree with you.
That is not how we do things anymore.
If that's the way
if that winds up being the case, that would be terrible.
That's got to be the case.
Well, I don't know if it's going to be the case.
Well, let's wager it right now. I tell you what, let's wager it right now. $100 per square mile that the Russians give back versus $100 per square mile they don't.
100 pennies.
I'll come out ahead on that deal. I guarantee it.
I think
100.
Whatever that is.
I think what they're going to do is roll it back to the Obama to what he took during.
Not a chance.
14.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Okay.
The Russians are losing 15. They're suffering 1,500 casualties a day on average.
Exactly, and that's the reason why they're going to have to do that. The other idea is that the military will have to get involved, and that's not going to happen.
Well, no, the American military must not get involved, and is not going to get involved.
No.
But here's the crazy thing. Zelensky has signaled that he would accept terms along those lines, but only if NATO forces then went into Ukraine to help enforce that peace.
Right.
Which would be America.
But the Americans, hold on, this is an important point. But the Americans are saying, look, if NATO forces go in, we are specifically excluding Article 5 of the NATO treaty.
Right.
That's the one about the mutual defense. So that if the Russians do, for whatever reason, end up engaging and attacking our NATO allies, we're not forced into the fight.
Yeah, because the majority of the NATO forces are America.
And the British, last point, and the British are saying, well, we ain't going in without Article 5. It's a mess.
It is.
And the one thing that
it is a mess.
I know I said last point, I have one more to make, so just one more. One thing that Donald Trump is absolutely right about, if he was president in 2022, Russia would not have invaded Ukraine. He's absolutely right about that. Russia invaded because they knew that Joe Biden was too much of a pussy to do anything about it. Barack Obama didn't do anything when they went into the Crimean Peninsula, and Putin knew that Joe Biden wouldn't do anything when they went into Ukraine proper.
No, but you see, the reason that Trump doesn't really care about NATO going in there because that's not his plan for securing the place anyway. The reason he wants the money for those minerals, but the real reason that he wants to do that is because if we have American businesses in there doing that and the Russians try to come back, that's going to be the trigger. And Trump's going to make sure they know that if you go in there and you start screwing around with American interests, then you will see the American military for reasons that are entirely justifiable.
Well, that is true. And Secretary of State Rubio said just this past week that he expects a mineral rights deal to be signed this coming week. So sometime before March 1st, we are likely to have some kind of mineral deal with Ukraine. That is absolutely true. But it still, in my view, does not justify rewarding Putin for its military aggression.
But what it does is it defines exactly the mannerism in which Trump is arguing his foreign policy. We're doing the same type of issue in Gaza as well. I mean, the whole idea here is not for us to make Gaza one big Trump landing zone or whatever, but it's to go ahead and to clean it up, have American interests be working with the other interests in the area to coalesce and build a uniform group to rebuild that area towards a habitable living situation. Because right now it's not. I mean, right now it's horrifying.
No, Trump is specifically trying to place articulable American interests in these hotspots so that when we do have diplomatic things going on there, the question isn't, why do you care? The question is, it's, okay, so we don't put there on your toes, so what can we do?
Well, you certainly, Scott, you're not implying that Donald Trump is trying to set up a scenario where he can justify American forces going to war against Russia, are you? That's not what you mean to be saying.
They won't.
I'm sorry, is your name Scott? No, what I'm saying is that if we have articulable American interests in these, because remember, this is America First policy. If we have an American interest in there, then it's a lot easier to settle this stuff diplomatically than it is, to try to do it through military force. Because, just like you said, if Trump had been there in 22, then it would have never happened. Well, it wouldn't have happened because they'd have known that you can't go in there at American interests. And throwing American interests in there is part of the security plan.
Exactly.
Right. Well, thank you for that clarification, because it sounded to me like you were saying that Trump wanted to set the table to justify American force against Russia. And I just want to make sure that wasn't what you meant.
We don't, and what no one seems to get is we don't need to set up these military conflicts with China or Russia, because both of those countries have set themselves up for a huge demographic collapse that'll probably start really taking effect within 10 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years, because they've killed so many of their productive people. The Russians through military actions in other countries, and the Chinese through their one-child policy. If you look at the demographic distribution of them, they are rapidly approaching a point where they don't have enough people that are going to be productive to support the people who are retired.
That's true. The numbers speak that. Absolutely.
India is number one now of population.
All we have to do is not get into a big fight with those guys, and they will collapse all among themselves because they don't have the ability to maintain what they have.
Well, the problem with China is that they have their eyes set on Taiwan. Taiwan's an American ally. We're not obligated to defend it. People think that under the Taiwan Relations Act, we are obligated. We're not. The Taiwan Relations Act simply requires the United States military to have enough presence in the Pacific that we could, if we chose to, defend Taiwan. But it doesn't obligate the actual defense of Taiwan. But China absolutely has their eyes on Taiwan. They absolutely have their eyes through this Belt and Road project around the world. Now, Donald Trump's putting a stop to that in some places, notably Panama. Right.
But okay, go ahead. I want you to finish.
Well, and so that's the Chinese problem, is that they are themselves expansionists. They haven't been expansionists for 6,000 years, and now all of a sudden they're expansionists. They're trying to create a blue water navy. They pose a threat to world peace. The Russians, they're killing themselves off through these ridiculous military conflicts. And if Russia didn't have nukes, it would be a laughable backwater. Unfortunately, the Russians do have nukes, and so They're a superpower. Conventional warfare, they're a joke, but they have nukes. And so they have to be respected as a superpower.
Well, Russia, the Russian economy, the entire Russian domestic product is less than the state of New York.
True. And they're suffering right now economically. Inflation in Russia is over 9%. Interest rates are over 20%. So there's problems in Russia, without question. And they are brought about by the war and the economic sanctions that have been imposed because of the war. And they're being shut out of the global banking system that runs through the United States, although that then triggers its own risk of the BRICS nations creating a BRICS currency to create against the dollar. And if that ever happens, the whole system collapses. So, there's lots of pieces on this chessboard that we need to consider.
Right.
I'm simply pointing out, and I'll say it once more, and then I'll drop it. We cannot reward Russia with territory as a result of their aggression. And that's the bottom line.
And I agree. I mean, that's actually, go ahead.
Well, Trump has been saying since day one that it is America first, and if there's not a direct American interest in the path of it, he ain't give a crap. He's not. He ain't trying.
I know.
He ain't trying to appease the Russians. He's trying to appease the Congress that likes to keep writing checks to a war that we have absolutely no vested interest in.
Well, the vested interest we have, and I know I said that would be the last time I'd speak of it, and it's obviously not. The vested interest we have is we cannot support military expansionism. Ever since the United Nations, and look, I'm no big fan of the United Nations, but under the UN Charter, member nations cannot use military force to acquire more territory. It's just not allowed under international law. And I agree with you in your analysis that Donald Trump, he's all about America first, and I can certainly respect that. But if we're going to put America first at the expense of allowing precedent to be set of, military expansionism, keep the territory, what message does that send to China that wants to use military to expand their territory?
We already set that precedent. We already set that precedent in 2014.
I brought that up earlier. Exactly. Once they went into Crimea and we did nothing about it under Obama, that set a bad precedent. And then nothing happened during Trump's first term. Biden gets in and the Russians go in and take even more territory. And now President Trump's trying to work out a deal that will get Russia to leave, but they're going to let them keep the territory. Bad precedent. Bad precedent.
I think it's a bad idea too, but I got to see the whole package. And you know how you know the old adage about the military, and that is simply that the Democrats want to cut the military relentlessly and send them everywhere, and the Republicans want to build the military endlessly and don't want to send them anywhere. So what we're doing right now is typical of Republicans. We're trying to get all the conflicts done and then and then stack our pieces high enough where we don't have to worry about someone being audacious enough to try to break in. I mean, that is what the strategy is, and under Republicans, this works great.
Donald Trump speaks loudly and carries a big stick.
And this actually goes back to the entire thing that brought up the entire conversation about them is the miscommunication and the misstep of the entire fake media of having everybody on a different page. And I mean, it causes confusion totally, where you and I, all of us are confused here on different pages at exactly what all's going on because nobody has a full picture. And I think it's being done on purpose and because, it creates a lot of doubt in our commander-in-chief. We don't need to have any doubt on what he's doing.
No. Our adversaries do not have any doubt. You think that Xi Jinping...
No, I think they do.
After Donald Trump met him for the first time in Mar-a-Lago, excused himself and said, I'll be back for dessert, goes and drops 60 cruise missiles on Syria and comes back and says laissez-faire, and I had to go drop some ordnance on Syria. I'm
not saying they're effective. I agree with you.
Okay. You think that any world leader doesn't think that Trump is serious?
No, I'm talking about the general public is what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. And so
Trump is saying his last election. Okay, right. The general public is entirely irrelevant to the conversation, as far as being manipulated by the media, because Trump is right now telling you what he plans to do. And you just got to believe it, because that is exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Big UN Enterprise. Real quick, before we go here, what are y'all's thoughts on the Gaza issue here with them returning a dead baby and two dead babies or dead children?
It's two dead babies in the wrong body for the mother.
Exactly. And I think Netanyahu's getting very impatient right now.
I don't care, as far as that goes. Yeah, so it's shocking to find out that the guy Hamas is going to lie and try to push the boundaries of whatever they can, because they know that it's this group they gave up over the weekend were the last of the living hostages. Everything else is just going to be sending back dead bodies, if they send them back at all.
Yeah,
so
I don't see why anybody should be surprised.
What I think it is, I think it's theater, and that's it.
Exactly. More showmanship on their end.
And as someone who is often accused of using too many words to describe what I think, I will sum up what I think in 8 words. Kill them all. Let Allah sort them out.
I agree. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and call it close here to this segment here. We went pretty long in this segment, but we want to thank everybody here for watching the Political Matrix News. Like Scott said, like us, subscribe us, share us. We're on TikTok now. We have a really good following starting to get created here on TikTok until that gets banned again. And so please just stick with us. Our algorithms are we're trying to overcome. And Scott, you got anything else coming up?
No, I'm just wrapping up construction and focusing on politics.
Yeah, and when's your show air on the Mike Bates Show?
Well, it airs on WPNN Radio in Pensacola Saturday morning 7 to 8, but within Central Time. But within an hour of airing on the radio, they go online as a podcast at www.themikebatesshow.com, and they're there forever, theoretically. So they're always available as the
WPNN.
What's that?
You can download or...
Yeah, you can get it on the TuneIn app or the WPNN app. If you go to talk103fm.com, you can see a link to it. Absolutely.
You have archives of your show there too, right?
Every single one. Every show I've ever done as the Mike Bates Show. Not every show I've done in my entire life in radio, but my very first show for Mike Bates Show on WPNN specifically was February 1st, 2020. And every single show from that day through this morning is all online at themikebatesshow.com.
Okay, great. Yeah, have a good evening.
All right,
guys. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. See you guys.
Bye-bye.